Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping items. Just so everyone knows, we have muted the lines today to avoid background noise, but if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to it during the question and answer period. Just so you know as well, we will be recording today's call. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Ron, to get things started.
Well, good day, everybody. My name is Ron Marcolin, and I am the Divisional Vice President of CME, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters. And I'm very pleased to partner with ARC Nuclear Canada to present today's webinar, specifically around the supply chain. And in fact, if you joined us over a year ago in St. John, New Brunswick in September in person, we had our first ever supply chain conversation live and in person, and in all fairness, we thought 50 people at the time may show up. It was very much oversubscribed. There were a couple of hundred people in the room, and it was of a lot of interest to New Brunswickers and beyond. So today is, in fairness, part 2 of the supply chain conversation. And just to give you a quick overview of who is CME and how do we relate to ARC Nuclear, they are very much a valued partner of ours, and they are a member of CME. We are a Canadian-wide, by name, obviously, trade and industry association. In fact, we're Canada's largest and oldest. In fact, we also celebrate our 150th anniversary next year. We, generally speaking, do 3 major things. We fight for the membership when it comes to advocacy and a wide variety of partners in government across the country. We have a lot of training programs that we've now pivoted to do, of course, because of COVID. We've now pivoted to do that virtually. And we have a number of educational pieces of our puzzle, including events. So today is all about supply chain and transformational industry that is coming to New Brunswick. It is a very exciting time for us in New Brunswick, specifically to nuclear and all the things around it. I don't profess to be even close to be a nuclear expert, but that's why we brought these people together today. We want to do a couple of quick housekeeping items, if we could, before we get started. We will have a Q&A at the end of this program. You can send in your questions by using the Q&A function, as you see, and you were sent this in advance, of course. We will get them together. If we are unable to answer your question today, we obviously have your information and your information to get back to you on that. In that regard. So what we'd like to do is actually to set the table and to start this webinar, we'd like to give you a 2-minute overview by way of video. This video is a new video. It's just been produced by ARC Nuclear. In fact, this 2-minute preview is the premiere showing. And as you will soon see, it shows a modern company where inclusivity and diversity are very much part of their culture.
I am Fawn Zeisner. I'm the Program Manager for ARC Nuclear Canada Inc., also known as ARC Canada. I am here today to represent ARC Canada and our parent company, Advanced Reactor Concepts. I am extremely passionate about the environment and the processes which make our planet so unique. As such, I chose to focus my education in this area. I graduated from St. Francis Xavier University in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in environmental science, and shortly after returned to my hometown here in St. John, New Brunswick, I was provided with a great career opportunity when I accepted the position of Program Manager for ARC Canada. Now I get to utilize my degree and focus my efforts in an area that I'm extremely passionate about, and that is mitigating climate change. ARC Canada established its head office here in St. John, New Brunswick in 2018 through a partnership with the provincial government to promote small modular reactor innovation. We are proud to be here in New Brunswick, which covers the traditional territories of Wolastoq, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. As such, our company prioritizes business reconciliation through the development of a path of meaningful partnership. As a young professional in the nuclear industry, I'm very proud to say that our company puts a priority on inclusivity and diversity. ARC Canada is developing a small modular reactor technology as a source of clean, safe, reliable, and affordable energy that not only addresses waste but opens opportunities for a resilient, low-carbon future and also provides economic benefits for New Brunswick and Canada. The province of New Brunswick has long been an active participant in the energy sector. Our technology partners with renewable energy sources to provide a baseload power to support this intermittent renewable energy source. Because when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, it is critical to have this clean energy support. And this energy is critical to power our homes, our schools, our hospitals, and our everyday lifestyles. I'm proud to say that I work for a team that's developing a technology that supports Canada's goal of net zero targets by 2050. This energy transition can not only assist in mitigating climate change, but also create jobs and tremendous economic benefits to the province of New Brunswick and Canada.
Wow, that certainly sets the stage. As I've said, it certainly gives us a great snapshot on what is ARC all about and what are they looking to do. So we have 3 guest speakers today. Our first up is the Honorable Mike Holland. And by way of introduction, Mike Holland was raised on a farm in rural New Brunswick. He's been an avid outdoorsman his entire life, and he's also an entrepreneur. He has sold outdoor gear, which in fact he invented. He founded the Resourceful Redneck Incorporated company, and he secured a deal on Canadian television CBC TV show, The Dragon's Den. Certainly a lot of stories about that, but we'll have to do that offline, Mike, as time goes on.
Sure.
He's also been, as I say, active in the outdoors. In fact, co-founded the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation, a non-for-profit organization that is quickly becoming the face of conservation in Canada. He started gaining political experience in 2010, working as an executive assistant with various cabinet ministers in different government departments within the province of New Brunswick. In his first venture into political life, Mike Holland was elected to the Legislative Assembly in New Brunswick in September of 2018 for the riding of Albert. On November 9th, 2018, he was appointed Minister of Energy and Resource Development. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Mike Holland.
Thank you very much, Ron. It's a pleasure to be able to reach out and have a chance to have a conversation with the supply chain group again this year. Different setting than we were in last year. I wish that we had the chance to be in the same room together again. I'm much more of a walk around a room, talk to people, see people, look you in the eyes when we have a conversation. But alas, this is the, this is the world we're in. Bonjour, bienvenue tout le monde. C'est mon plaisir de parler avec nous aujourd'hui. It's a pleasure to be back here again this year. Since we were there last year, we've gone through a global pandemic, add to that another provincial election, but here we stand, ready to move forward into the future and continue to see results from the work that ARC Nuclear's done. I have been put back in the position of Minister of Natural Resources and Energy Development, and I'm very thankful for that because I feel like we were at the front end of a significant amount of good work. I go back to the early days when I met with Don Wolf and his team, and completely from a neophyte perspective, having no knowledge of nuclear, let alone the new world of the small modular reactor. And we've come a long way since then. Last year when we spoke in terms of philosophy. We discussed emerging fields. We discussed opportunities that are going to be coming our way. I spoke very much about the fact that early into my mandate, when this opportunity became very real to me, I said, let's move forward with that. There's an old saying that says, the one who sees the opportunity is the one who will seize the opportunity. Well, last year we talked about the process that I'd gone through to see the opportunity, and that became crystal clear and hopefully evident in the comments that I made last year when I spoke to the supply chain group. And I've been working very hard to ensure that that message gets delivered to the highest levels of our provincial government and beyond. And I'm very proud of the fact that over the course of the last year, we've made progress. We've made headway. It's not just Mike talking about it now. I was very proud to stand with the Premier during the last election campaign and speak and announce the commitment that this government would have to small modular reactor technology. We've come a long way. We've gone from drawing board essentially to a strong commitment from our provincial government to say that we are behind this technology. I have incredible thanks to give to Don Wolf, to Norm Sawyer, the supportive staff that are around the leadership of ARC, because they equipped me with the information that I needed to deliver that message to ensure that my team and my Premier and our government was committed to moving forward with that. So we did see it last year, and now we're walking forward. And congratulations to ARC for a continued process of improvement and achievement as we're a year later down the road and poised to really bring this to fruition. There's been a lot of things take place over the last year, but there's a lot of things that are going to have to take place as we go forward into the near future. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. We spoke in large terms and big picture last time, but I'm going to ask for some help. I'm going to ask for some help specifically from our supply chain participants and the folks that are part of that network to make this a reality. You see, as we start moving forward and taking tangible steps to say that we're planning our flag, the nuclear flag, the small modular reactor flag in the province of New Brunswick, it's one thing to be discussing it amongst ourselves, but when governments pop their head up and say we're moving forward with something, well, it also can lead to criticism. And I want some help here because I have spent a significant amount of time dismantling myths or social media and discussions around small modular reactors. And I wanted to speak out because if a politician says something, well, you know, we are considered one of the least trusted professions on the planet. So it's one thing for me to speak and talk about the value and the validity and the opportunity that comes with small modular reactors. And as my government speaks to it, once again, the source sometimes doesn't get the credibility that it deserves. ARC is the proponent, and of course they're going to speak to the bright days ahead as we step into this emerging technology. But I need to speak to the province of New Brunswick. Particularly today, I'm speaking to the supply chain of the folks that are going to be intricately involved in bringing that opportunity to light and seeing a tangible benefit to New Brunswick and to New Brunswickers. So as we move forward, I know I've seen it. SMRs have been in the news more this year than they ever have been. And I've also noticed that there's an irony that's taking place. Those that should be standing and supporting a move towards clean energy that moves us in the direction of meeting our emission reduction targets are sometimes folks that are vocally opposed to what it is that we're doing. And like I said, that irony is something I find very interesting, but it's something that I am going to tackle head on. And I will address every time when I see a mistruth or when I see something that varies a little bit from the actual plan of where we're going. I'm speaking out. I need your help. I need your shoulders to stand on so that it's not just a government or a politician that's speaking, but it's a collected and unified group of people who are going to speak intelligently about what this opportunity means for us here in the province of New Brunswick. We are poised to be a world leader, and we are poised to bring clean energy throughout the entire globe. We need to celebrate that. We need to stand on what it is that we've done and continue the path forward to get to where we're going. So as folks that are involved in the supply chain, I am asking you to not just prepare for what this means for your business, but to help in general, to speak about it as you see the discussion come up, as you see it in forums, as you see it in print and in media. Make sure that your voice is heard. Now that may be around your kitchen table. It may be around a coffee shop. It may be hanging off a tailgate somewhere. But regardless, we need a collected fraternity and sorority of supporters that come behind this small modular reactor technology. And as each one of those myths are debunked, I think we will see us move into this era. New Brunswick has certainly got a long-standing track record of stability, safety, reliability, and affordability from nuclear energy. I find that there's a big focus taking place with folks who oppose small modular reactors, looking in the rearview mirror, looking at circumstances that are the same as comparing carburetors to fuel injectors. It just isn't a fair comparison. You know, we are talking about a technology that doesn't find itself susceptible to the human error or the lack of redundancies, or simply just outdated technology that we've seen in the past. We need to collectively get together, work together, and speak about the incredible opportunity. Start talking about what that means for potential employment. Start talking about what that means for increased cash flows for our local businesses. Start talking about how this can turn into a direct result of homes in New Brunswick that are experiencing prosperity. We're in a world right now where prosperity seems distant and hard to get our hands on. But despite what the world is throwing at us with COVID, I am so proud of the fact that ARC Nuclear is continuing to move forward in the progressive direction of realizing their goals. The province of New Brunswick is committed to that. The government of Canada is committed to that. I have met directly with the Minister of Natural Resources for Canada, sat across the desk from him and said, you know, if we are to reach our net zero emission goals, it requires nuclear. Imagine us being here in little old New Brunswick, being able to be a linchpin in that supply chain. And as we continue to talk and speak about prosperity, speak about hope in a world that hasn't seen a lot of it in the last year, back it up with the facts that talk about where we are safe, we are reliable, and we are the future when it comes to clean energy. Then I think we'll see that narrative become favorable. And we need to capitalize on opportunities, absolutely, but we also need to address obstacles. And for the upcoming year, I want to reach out and ask your help. I'm going to continue to ask this with other stakeholder groups, but collectively and together, we see the opportunity. Now it's time for us to seize it. And I feel like we're positioned in a very good place. I'm very humbled to have been work as closely with ARC and their team. And I'm looking forward to seeing us move into a new year and see significant results. I really very much thank you very much for your time. I do look forward to when we can stand and deliver an address like this in the same room together. But until then, let's keep moving and let's keep getting results. So I want to thank you for your time. Merci, mes amis, et au revoir, et à la prochaine, the next time that we have a chance to talk. So Ron, those are my remarks. And if possible, COVID has created some legislative chaos, and I would like to wish you well and then head on to seeing if we can navigate something that's a little more confusing than our nuclear file.
Well, Minister Holland, thank you so very much for those insightful comments. We certainly hear what you're saying. I think it's, to be very honest, very refreshing that you're asking us for help. Usually it's always the other extreme, but I think the collective we here in New Brunswick are certainly up for the challenge. We certainly certainly have vested interests, that's very obvious, but we know the long list of advantages that SMRs have. And we certainly take you up on your offer of help. So notwithstanding thumbs up, we'll certainly give that back right to you. We'll say yes, and we'll certainly open even more dialogue as time permits on that front. So thank you so very much for that. Appreciate that.
Take care. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks again. So ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our second speaker today. By way of a bit of a bio and introduction, Brett Plummer, who's the Chief Nuclear Officer and Vice President of NB Power, New Brunswick Power here in the province. He was appointed to his position at NB Power's Point Lepreau Nuclear Generation Station in November of 2015. As a member of the executive, he is accountable for leading the Point Lepreau Nuclear generating station's strategic direction, he's taken the lead in pursuing small modular reactors for our province, and he's clearly played an active role in developing the SMR roadmap for all of Canada. He has over 40 years experience in commercial nuclear power plant operations, senior leadership, and project management roles. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in technical business and an Associate Science degree in nuclear engineering technology. While in the United States Navy, he attended the Navy Nuclear Power School and the Navy Electronics Technical School. Additionally, Brett has completed senior nuclear plant management courses. He was always known to give a very unique perspective on SMR development in New Brunswick. So without further ado, Mr. Brett Plummer.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate the intro. That was a good talk from Minister Holland. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. I'm going to be talking a little bit about this opportunity. What does it all mean? Some of it may be a little redundant, some may not, but it'll catch up to date with where we are. Why nuclear? What collaboration have we done in the province and also across Canada with the other utilities and some of the nuclear entities? Where does it all fit in? What activities are going on in New Brunswick? Why advanced reactors? A lot of people ask that question. Why ARC? What's the economic impact? What are the challenges we have going forward, and what does the future look like? So we'll talk a little bit about all of that. So first, why nuclear? As you heard Minister Holland say, and if you're a realist, you cannot reach net zero 2050 without nuclear. You just can't do it. And it doesn't mean just nuclear alone. It has to be integrated with other non-carbon generation, including renewables. But it has to be an integrated package. But nuclear is a low carbon emitter. And it'll become more and more important as things change in the future. Regulation, fees on carbon, so forth. We're going to have to electrify the industries, vehicles, manufacturing, boating, fisheries. Between hydrogen and electrification, we need to do that as well. And that's going to take power. So when somebody says they have an electric car and they're charging it, but they don't know where the power is coming from, well, it could be coming from a coal plant or something that's generating carbon. So our goal is to support that electrification and make sure that all that power is coming from non-carbon generating sources. We need to retire some older stations. We need to integrate with renewables. And you'll hear this more and more theme through my discussion is it's not nuclear or renewables, it's nuclear and renewables. And the reactors that we chose in ARC actually synchronize with and integrate with renewables. It's very important. And we need to make sure that renewables are great. We need to build what we can as long as there's a plan to back up that power when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. Nuclear is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's very, very resistant to weather. We have an ice storm that knocks out a large area for 7 days, polar vortexes, you name it, nuclear is usually online holding up the grid. And that's what we're looking for in the future. Next slide, please. It shows here, and some people, they don't realize how low the carbon input is from nuclear, but it's extremely low. It's on the order of wind. And really it's from the generation, the concrete, the construction of the site itself initially. And most nuclear power plants are licensed and or good, the facility itself, for about 60 years. So the carbon contribution is extremely low. Next slide, please. So over the last couple of years, there's been a tremendous amount of collaboration coming up with a pan-Canadian approach. There's been the SMR roadmap that Ron mentioned. There's been a New Brunswick fiscal commitment, which I'll talk a little bit more about. There's been a CEO SMR forum that was generated, and actually it was started with New Brunswick. We asked the CANDO Owners Group to facilitate it across all the utilities in Canada, to basically understand the commitment and try to get alignment amongst all utilities so that we're not competing or fighting against each other. There was an interprovincial MOU, Memo of Understanding, signed, which was also mentioned, between New Brunswick, Ontario, Saskatchewan, and now Alberta signing on. There's been a supply chain assessments across New Brunswick to understand what capacity we could actually build these simplistic reactors in New Brunswick, what capacity building we may need to do, and then what would we purchase outside the province. Through NRCan, Natural Resource Canada, we've generated, not we, but NRCan has generated a SMR action plan, which we are all part of. And we've inputted to that action plan as well as ARC. And that'll be coming out very soon. And with that is a feasibility study for the feasibility of these reactors. And the input into that feasibility study was a market analysis, which ultimately ended up with an economic impact assessment. And I'll share those values towards the end of the presentation. There was university collaboration. So there was funding that was contributed from the province to the vendors, which they had to match. And there was also some of that funding had to go towards the University of New Brunswick. And in fact, they've also collaborated with Chalk River in Ontario. And then we have the interprovincial nuclear expertise that we're all working together. And then recently, we've had New Brunswick Nuclear Cluster Memo of Understanding between NB Power, ARC, and Moltex to actually try to solidify and take advantage wherever we can, wherever possible, including the supply chain, economic efficiencies. Next slide, please. So where do we fit in this pan-Canadian approach? There's 3 streams, and you've probably heard them. Stream 1 is the ready deployable. They need power by 2028 in Ontario. They need power in Saskatchewan before 2030 to prevent from building some natural gas plants. So they're going to go with a more ready, available technology for Stream 1. First one will be built at Darlington, and most likely the first 2 units in Saskatchewan will use that technology. Most likely a light water technology, but terrestrial is also one of the ones considered. Stream 2 is the advanced stream. So we're in the advanced on-grid technologies, and New Brunswick is taking that lead. And we're taking that lead through ARC and also Moltex. And then Stream 3 is the very small reactors, 1 to 2 megawatts electric, and also the remote communities, 10 to 30 megawatts electric. And that's really for, again, remote communities and or mining and industry. Could be very conducive to, again, the Northwest Territories where they're using diesel heavily, and or Alberta in the oil sands for oil production. We can make a tremendous dent in the decarbonization by generating the power they use to produce oil from nuclear. Next slide, please. So the activities in New Brunswick, again, we have ARC and Moltex. We're here today to talk about ARC has sponsored the supply chain event. They've established their offices in St. John, and they've been through the Canadian regulator vendor design review phase 1 process, which is looking at their conceptual design, and they're getting ready to go on to their preliminary design. We also have research and development that has actually started at the University of New Brunswick and in collaboration with Chalk River. We've mentioned the supply chain meetings, and we've done a tremendous amount of engagement. So Minister Holland talked about, you know, the help that we need to get the correct story and the facts out there. We are available. We've done presentations all across the province to whoever would like to hear it, including First Nations, just trying to educate people on the facts. What are small modular reactors? What are the benefits of small modular reactors? What are the benefits of advanced small modular reactors? Because there's a tremendous amount of people out there that just are looking for some drama to poo-poo basically this innovation and this opportunity. And when they do some of the comparisons, they're comparing the construction of small modular reactors to the past large light water reactors, which is not a fair comparison. So we want to make sure we get the facts out there. We also have the Atlantic Clean Energy Alliance, which is several entities that have gotten together in the Atlantic bubble to sit there and promote small modular reactors. We have signed a memo of understanding between MB Power and Chalk River to also collaborate on small modular reactors. And again, I mentioned the vendors, ARC and Multex and MB Power have signed a collaboration memo of understanding. So a tremendous amount of activity in New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So why advanced? And I mean advanced, non-water cooled reactors. If you look at ARC, it's clean energy. It's non-carbon emitting. It's a necessary part of the climate solution. It's required. And we even have some folks in the province who in the past have not supported nuclear that have actually looked at the facts, because the decarbonization by 2050 is more important to them than maybe their mindset or paradigm in the past. And they've reached out, read up, got the facts, and understood the importance of nuclear to reach those goals. And now they're supporting nuclear. They're inherently safe. ARC is a very, very safe reactor. And it's based on EBR-2 down in the United States, which was a 20 megawatt electric research reactor in Idaho that ran for 30 years, ran very successfully. This reactor is an upscaled version of it. And they've actually proven, walk away safe, proven that in Idaho. This reactor is very safe, passive design. Very simplistic, depressurized pool reactor. And that goes into the supply chain, low cost, modular construction. But we will require basically fleet support for these reactors. That's the opportunity for employment, manufacturing, and so forth. It has the potential, it's a 20-year core, but it has the potential to recycle its own used fuel, reducing the nuclear fuel cycle tremendously. And I know Norm will mention this coming up, tremendously. It also decreases the radiotoxicity. It's a shorter half-life for the waste, so it's in the order of generations instead of hundreds of thousands of years. Tremendous value. It supports renewables. It integrates with renewables. So again, when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow, you can back off these reactors, or you can keep the power going and generate hydrogen for storage. Very high temperature steam. It's conducive to industry. Any kind, desalinization, cogeneration, hydrogen generation, you name it. Very high quality, high temperature steam. That's not necessarily the case from the thermal reactors that we're running now. And again, the supply chain. This is not only a carbon issue, it's also an economic development issue for New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada, and Canada. Next slide, please. So again, the ARC reactor. Based on EBR-2, 20 megawatts electric. This is an upscale to 100 megawatts electric. It's a depressurized pool reactor. It does not have the potential within the core, in the cooling, to expel radioisotopes. Inherently safe. And again, we talked about EBR-2. It can recycle its own fuel. And I can't say that enough. I'm repeating a little bit, but I can't say it enough. It has a 20-year fueling cycle, superior load following for the integration with renewables, and high temperature steam. Next slide, please. So we did a market analysis, got fed into a feasibility study, which also the market analysis was fed into an economist at the University of Moncton, independent of the university, but to an economic economist in Moncton, who had also done previous economic impact assessments for the province of New Brunswick and also MB Power. And these are the median benefits of building these small modular reactors in New Brunswick. You can see the benefit for New Brunswick, tremendous benefit, and also for Canada, including New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges to making this happen? This is a long game. These reactors will come to fruition somewhere in late 2020s, most likely 2030, early 2030 for ARC. I think there's a chance, I know Norm will talk about it, 2029, but somewhere in that range. And most people will only think 3 to 5 years out. But when it comes to climate change, we need to be thinking 20 to 30 years out on what we need to do from a non-carbon generating integrated energy source. So we need to start thinking long. Human nature, short-term returns. This is where it comes in the investment, government, so forth. Government agencies for funding. Usually, again, it's 3 to 5 years. They need to see a return in 3 to 5 years. Again, this return we will not see for at least 10 years. So again, we need to get over that mindset, that paradigm. We need to understand this is, again, to reach that goal for 2050. And the last one I listed here is fear of nuclear power. When we talk to people, the two largest concerns is catastrophic failure, Fukushima, Chernobyl, and the other one is the generation of used fuel. These reactors deal with both of those issues. They're inherently safe. They're depressurized pool reactors. They don't just decrease the possibility, they eliminate the possibility of basically fuel melt. They also, as I mentioned, ARC recycles its own fuel, which helps close that fuel cycle tremendously. It's a very small footprint from nuclear anyways, because it's such a dense energy source. If you look at Point Lepreau, for 30 some odd years, it's a very small footprint that we actually contain, manage, and handle that waste, which we've done safely across Canada for over 50 years. But now we have a solution to potentially minimize that waste and minimize the waste generated from ARC by recycling its own used fuel. So again, we try to pick two technologies, and ARC specifically deals with both of those concerns. We need to make sure we communicate the facts. We are available to factually answer any question. Okay, next slide, please. So my last slide, and I'll wrap it up. We need to stop thinking, you know, my mindset, I've been taught nuclear, this is, you know, so forth, and it's either renewables or nuclear, and that's it. I'm not going to consider anything else. The truth is, it's both. It has to be both. In order to decarbonize this world and reach the goals by 2050, it has to be both. It has to be an integrated solution of renewables, peaking systems, digitalization, hydrogen generation, oil production using nuclear or some other form of energy, electrification, remote heating, cogeneration, desalinization. It's all of the above. So folks, please get educated on how we can integrate all these energy sources to reach our goal, and at the same time, create a tremendous economic development opportunity in New Brunswick. Thank you. Back to you, Ron.
Well, thank you very much, Brett. Wow, that's a lot to digest for some of us non-nuclear folk, but we're certainly getting up to speed. I think you've really encapsulated it quite nicely. I mean, a couple of takeaways. I mean, I know there's a long list, but certainly climate change and the carbon issue, you've certainly touched on that in detail. It's obviously a business development issue, but all the pieces around it too. We have to, as Minister Holland talked about, have to have the education. So this certainly gives us time as a society to get up on education and educate the common New Brunswicker, if I could say it like that, to what is nuclear, what piece of nuclear are we dealing with, and your great point of it's merely a piece of the puzzle. So thank you very much for that insight. I want to remind people that we do have a question and answer function. We would like to hear your questions. Certainly at the end of Norm Sawyer's discussion, we will be answering a number of questions, so feel free to do that. We are getting a number in. If we can't get them all done today, by all means, we can get back to you. However, I would like to now move on to our third speaker, Norm Sawyer. He is the president and CEO of ARC Nuclear. He's a proven business leader with a track record of driven performance and certainly a lot of high results in the complex corporate world. Additionally, in the public sector and in the industry environments in which he has worked. He's a strategic thinker. He certainly deals with a lot of teams in his business life. He's a great communicator and advisor, and he has built his skills on technical and regulatory foundations, allowing him to rise to senior executive roles within the energy sector. He has more than 37 years of combined nuclear power industry experience in Canada, and he's been involved both on the operation side, as it were, of nuclear power plants and the regulation side of the nuclear industry in Canada. His experience is broad and deep. He's worked 5 years at Bruce Power, where he rose to the position of EVP and Chief Nuclear Officer. He's worked at Hydro-Quebec, the Gentilly 2 nuclear generation station as station manager. And earlier in his career, he was here in New Brunswick with over 16 years at NB Power, fulfilling a number of key roles and holding a senior reactor operating license at Point Lepreau nuclear generation station. And finally, on the regulatory side in Norm's prior lives, he's worked 10 years at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, the regulatory body in Canada in the nuclear industry. He held the position of Director of Licensed Operator Training and Examination. That is quite a long list, Norm Sawyer, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you, everyone, Norm Sawyer. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ron. It kind of dates me, I guess, when people talk about that stuff. Anyway, yeah, I'd like just to start by saying thanks for everybody for joining us. I know everybody has a busy day, and as a few people have mentioned, it'd be so nice to do this and where we were last year, but we're in a new world for this year, and hopefully only for another 6 to 9 months. But you know, we, as Minister Holland mentioned, we got to keep moving to bring this project, you know, to light in New Brunswick. I just want to start out by saying the title of this presentation that I'm making is called "Reactivating the Underutilized New Brunswick Supply Chain." And you know, it was interesting when I was thinking about what I would say today. I listened to the Premier of this province last week, and in fact, these are words that he used, which really have been the goal that ARC Nuclear Canada has been working on to bring the technology to market, but to bring it to market from New Brunswick and really understanding the supply chain in New Brunswick as I know it, as being a New Brunswicker and knowing the great people that work here. I just thought that had to be the title of what I was going to talk about today. Je veux juste en passant vous dire, je suis francophone, j'étais à l'école à Richibouctou. Alors, s'il y a des questions françaises, certainement avancez-les et je les trouverai puis j'essaie de répondre le mieux que je peux. Juste pour vous dire aussi que on parle avec le Conseil économique du Nouveau-Brunswick de peut-être faire une présentation semblable à les membres là. Thank you. Next slide, please. So I would just like to start by saying ARC Nuclear recognizes that New Brunswick covers the traditional territories of Wolastoq, Mi'kmaq, Passamaquoddy peoples and the regions and part of Wabanaki. As our commercial said earlier on, this is something that is very close to my heart as being a New Brunswicker. And in fact, when we're building the company, one of our goals is to make the company look much like what the culture is in New Brunswick as we continue to move forward. Next slide, please. So we are a technology company. We've always said that. And what does that mean? Next slide. What it means is a company, maybe a lot of people don't know this, but the company is actually owned through private investment and through GE Hitachi Nuclear Energy. If anybody knows anything about General Electric, Canada and worldwide, they are a massive company. But what we've been doing here in New Brunswick is, you know, growing partnerships as we continue to move forward, both in New Brunswick, Canada, and internationally. And you can see a selection of emblems that we put together here. Most of them are from New Brunswick, but we have some from the U.S. We have some from Atlantic provinces. As we continue to move forward, as we continue to look at what we need to work and bring our technology to market, these companies more and more, we continue to gather more and more numbers. At one point, I won't be able to put them all on one slide, I'm sure. Next slide, please. So ARC Canada really has as a core objectives to foster local economic growth opportunities. We are a technology company and we understand we have a technology to deliver, but we're matching that up with growth opportunities. And what by that I mean is just promoting economic opportunities for Indigenous peoples and for New Brunswickers by providing opportunities for equity partnerships, for example, having hiring plans that reflect First Nations representation, diversity, inclusivity, bilingualism, and a focus on local and Canadian talent. And really, I'm really proud. And when I speak as a New Brunswicker, last week I was speaking at an international conference. I normally speak once or twice a week, it seems lately, with these webinars. And I'm always proud to say I'm from New Brunswick, and this company's being built in New Brunswick, and it's providing an opportunity that possibly New Brunswick companies didn't have before. And really, we're promoting environmental friendly solutions, economic growth as we continue to move forward. Next slide, please. So as Brett explained a little bit earlier, there is an MOU across Canada, and I was really happy to be there that day for what I considered a historic signature. I've been in the nuclear industry a long time, and I can't remember such an event ever happening before. And really, it's there to develop, to gain the federal and public support and engage all the provinces and territories. And as some of you may have heard, there's even mention of Alberta preparing to sign on also. And it really provided a pathway for a pan-Canadian approach, a streaming approach. And as Brett mentioned, we're in Stream 2, the green one that I pointed out here. But what's the differentiator for I think, Stream 2, and why New Brunswick was so visionary when they selected the two technologies they went with? It's really technologies that deal with past, current, and future waste. Out of everything else that's going on, these two technologies are the only two doing that right now in Canada. So what we're doing is setting ourselves up with dealing with, I guess, sometimes this may not be a good comparison. When we went to fossil fuels, well, CO2 emissions were occurring. And when we went to nuclear, well, there was used fuel. We're now starting to deal with CO2 emissions. Now we're starting to deal with used fuel. So I think this is really a visionary from a New Brunswick perspective. Next slide, please. So we're a proven technology, ready for market, as again Brett was mentioning. Next slide. We've had a prototype run. Again, one of the only SMRs in the world that has had this prototype run, and in fact, EBR2 is a prototype for a number of other companies in different markets than us. For example, some of you may have heard of TerraPower. TerraPower is owned by Bill Gates. They're developing a similar technology to ours, but they're big ones. They're 700, 800, 900 megawatts, a lot bigger than the R100. So, and GE has a technology that's very similar, but we're all in different markets. So it's a technology that ran extremely well. It's proven. We have a number of IP protected patents in place, including metal fuel and core designs. And we address a number of key technical, economic, and geopolitical barriers to nuclear. We've done that in the design. So really, we brought an evolutionary patent technology to market. And we're starting to be recognized. For example, the IAEA, which is in Vienna, which is the worldwide organization. I'm proud to say that ARC Canada is in there, reflective of the New Brunswick technology being developed. We were also only one of two or three SMR technologies that were produced that got in the CENE Nice Future campaign, the International Report on Flexible Nuclear. And that's, again, an international document that continues to show that Canada and New Brunswick are moving forward with advanced technologies. Next slide, please. So you can see here that it's really a paradigm shift in reactor manufacturing that we're talking about. Because we operate essentially at atmospheric pressures and we're non-corrosive coolant, we don't have expensive alloys to use. There's no massive traditional structures. And it's really lowering the cost. And really that's essential for the industry to survive, the nuclear industry. So, and the reason why we can do that is because of a principle called inherent safety. And what that means is the reactor naturally controls its power without human intervention. I'm a nuclear guy. I don't like to say things like walk away safe. You never want to walk away from anything. But these little reactors will, as temperature goes up, it'll actually shut itself down very easily. So that gives you a lot of flexibility. And you can see here on a future energy system where, you know, you still have wind, hydro, and solar, you still need those things. You know, as Brett mentioned, we are part of this, not the only solution. We are part of the solution. So you can provide power either directly through, the little reactor following the power, because one thing about particular wind and solar, there's a lot of variance in the generation. So something needs to follow that. But also, you can buy off-the-shelf heat storage peaking tanks, which is really big tanks of liquid that you heat up and you can use the steam later for peaking ability. But the size of our reactor was also made so we could talk a little bit about hydrogen production. We link up very well with that. In fact, I'm proud to say that we were talking to Canadian National Labs a couple of weeks ago with MB Power, talking about hydrogen production possibly in the province. Also heat for desalination of water, so we can provide clean water to some countries that really are struggling with that issue. Next, please. And the fuel, the waste, as Brett mentioned, a lot of there's been always kind of three things about nuclear. One has been safety. Well, the nuclear power plants have always been safe, particularly in Canada. And we have what I call a gold star regulator that ensures it's safe. The second piece has been all about cost and building and time, how long it takes to build them. Well, with modularization, you end up reducing costs significantly, and especially if you match that up with inherent safety, which makes our reactors 2 levels of safety higher than current, even though they're safe today. You can manufacture these things in a different way than you did before. And the third one is the waste. This slide here kind of shows the waste production. So this is some of the research we've been doing for about 90,000 homes for 1 year, which is about the size of St. John and Fredericton, just houses. And you can see what it would look like. So a light water reactor, which is normally found in the US, it's somewhere around 2 metric tons per terawatt hour. You can see a heavy water reactor is over 16 tons. And an ARC 100, which is the technology we have, for a 20-year cycle would produce under 2 tons, 1.7 tons. But as Brett mentioned, once you start recycling, or we call it reconstitution, it's down to a couple of hundred pounds. So it's just, you can see the massive decrease in used fuel, and one of the major issues that people have been talking about for nuclear for a number of years. And that's why I keep saying the New Brunswick approach being so much visionary. It's the only one like this. The only technologies that are in Canada today are in New Brunswick that are dealing with this issue. Next slide, please. The market is big. Our studies are showing, if you start from left to right, what we're showing here is there's about over the next till 20 years or so, the total market, it's believed will be around 398 gigawatts of electricity that are needed. Now, some of that is in China, and we've excluded that market. We're not going to China, and I certainly don't believe China is coming here. Then you're left with replacement power and some new builds. So the market, we brought it down to around 299, 300 gigawatts. So therefore, then we went and looked at it and said, okay, we believe our intel tells us half will be the big plants, the billion-dollar plants, and half will be the SMR plants. So for example, our plants will be about 500 million. So if you just take the SMR market, we tried to be conservative. We said, we're not taking all the SMRs. There'll be other SMRs built. We're going to go for about 20% of the total SMR market, only 20%. That's worth about $160 billion market opportunity. So you just got to rationalize that in the back of your head. Now, it's really incredible when you think about it, but there's Old power, coal, gas, and old nuclear all have to be replaced. And everybody's saying it has to be replaced. We cannot do this without nuclear. It is part of the solution. So there is a significant market opportunity available to us and to other SMRs, not only us, but however, what we bring is the opportunity to New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about supply chain design and development that we've been working on. And I call this phase 2 because we just completed phase 1. Phase 1 was at a high level to make sure people understood we were here. We're starting to look. We started gathering some information. Phase 2 is a little bit deeper dive, still at a high level, but we are starting to collect data, which is the important piece here. Next slide. So the next steps, really, we're going to begin the supply chain analysis to understand the capabilities here in New Brunswick and the support required from other provinces and other countries. There's always investments opportunities. However, there is a limit to what we can get done here in New Brunswick. And I'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, but we're going to give first choice to New Brunswick. Next slide, please. So as we continue our design work, the components are more precisely defined, as you can well imagine. So we'll compare the requirements to New Brunswick, the Atlantic provinces, as a capabilities, as a priority, and to manufacture at cost competitive pricing. So obviously cost comes into play here, but we are really pushing this New Brunswick and Atlantic provinces first ability to produce some of these parts. You know, I have a little table here. This is just, you know, for example, you know, we're looking at like somewhere around 4 million tubes over 25 years. So there's all sorts of stuff to be made here as we continue to work forward, as we continue the design. As the design becomes more and more precise, you have a really good view of what type of materials you need and what pieces and parts you need. Next slide. So here is the part of our first review in phase 1 when we looked at Canada. We looked at Canada first, and then we just reached in at a high level, and we had tabletop exercises with a few people, including some people from NB Power, and we looked at what it might look like. And so right off the top, without any investment, we felt about around 74-75% of everything that we need done can be done in Canada. That's to start with. And then we looked at New Brunswick, and New Brunswick, which wasn't surprising to me when we went through it, we felt somewhere around 51% of that could be done in New Brunswick. And that's without, again, I said, without any investment, with any strategies whatsoever. So as we continue to move forward, I'm hoping that number to continue to grow, both at the Canadian level and at the New Brunswick level. But we do realize there's some pieces that most likely will not be able to be built in New Brunswick or in Canada for that matter. Next slide. So when you look at these things, you know, you're gonna, you know, we're gonna have to look at many considerations as we go forward. There are a number of things you can say here. We tried to list some of them. I mean, there's thousands of them, but here's some of them. But you have to look at it in two perspectives. First of all, you look at it manufacturing and supply chain, and you can see that's around licensing, engineering, procure, construct, startup. But there's also this second piece, which we're really interested in, and New Brunswick is interested in. It's called the fleet services. So you can imagine it's almost like you start selling cars, GMs, or start selling planes, Boeing. Once you sell your car or your plane or your telephone or whatever that may be, there always has to be a piece in the background to continue to maintain those plants. So the fleet services, we see that as somewhere in New Brunswick where you'd have you know, various groups helping out with training, for example, offline monitoring and to provide maintenance in certain areas of you know, security and capital project. All those sorts of things still have to be done. So, you know, a lot of time we talk about manufacturing supply chain as just being one piece. Well, in fact, it's actually two pieces. There's actually the build build out, and then there's actually the support that happens after, which is the fleet services, which I think will create a lot of work and obviously jobs too. Next slide, please. So as we look at our reactor, there's basically 3 areas. There's the nuclear island, the turbine island, and then there's the balance of plant. And various qualifications will be required for each, obviously. But at the end of the day, the qualifications, and when we're doing our analysis, we're really looking at ability to meet the product requirements capability, the rigor and control of processes, audits. There'll have to be audits done to make sure things are being built the way we said they were going to be built. And there's clear and detailed procurement documentation from our end to make sure you're building it to spec. And there's performance. Obviously, we always need to have a continuous performance approach to everything we do as we continue to build these things. So, as I mentioned, what's key to know here is increasing requirements as you get closer to the reactor. But obviously, as you get away from the reactor, the requirements go down. But there'll always be requirements. I don't think anybody builds anything today without some sort of quality management or quality assurance of some sort. Next slide, please. So this is interesting. So one of the questions they always is about nuclear is it is a highly regulated industry. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which I mentioned I believe is a gold star nuclear regulator in the world, they do keep a close eye on a licensee such as NB Power. And that's what the laws ask them to do. And I think they do a very good job of it. But they also will be looking, so if NB Power is our customer, for example, our first of a kind is going to be built at Pointe-Lepreau, we'll be providing some services and some technical, some designs and things like that. It will be up to the licensee to audit us. However, you can always expect the CNSC to be observing. But we will also have to do the same thing. So we can show our customer, which is NB Power, that we're getting good parts and quality parts put together. So there will be required quality oversight, so some more extensive than others. So it's a little bit like the reactor core. Again, as the closer you get to the power plant, the more auditing you'll get from the regulator. However, there's always going to be auditing being done just to make sure that we have quality parts. Next slide, please. And what we've been looking at it really is the facilities themselves. You can see here that we haven't excluded any locations yet. We see right now 3 at the big level. Obviously, the St. John. We have to be close to a port, so you can tell that you'd be in St. John Port. But there's also the Dalhousie Port and the Belledune Port that have areas that could be used. So we are basically looking at that now. There's going to be requirements that we're going to have to understand and clear. So, for example, transportation by road, rail, and sea, supporting infrastructures. I just talked about airports, offices, housing, and other potential areas of impact. So when we go through the decision-making process of where the major facility will be, we'll be looking at all those things. Now, there's also, from our company's perspective, I've been working with the board on various ownership options that might be available for this facility. Obviously, a major partner would be one, a specific manufacturer could be a second grouping, and then it would be us ourselves. So it'll depend which grouping we take. But there is, like I say, we're down to 3 options currently, and possibly another one, but we're down to roughly 3 to see how we could do this. So really what we're trying to do, you can see the little vessel here in the middle. It'll be built in the shop, something on the left. And although it's not the vessel, you can see something on the right. It would be roughly that size. And then that would have to be shipped across Canada, and in New Brunswick, across Canada, and around the world. Next slide. So a lot of steps in what we're going to do here. There's no doubt. And that's what I was saying, we're going in phase. So you can see where we are on the red circle here. We're really at the capability gap assessment and then to identify and prioritize local suppliers. That's where we are today. We've been doing that, we're going from phase 1 into phase 2. And a lot of the work we're doing is really to understand the capability of New Brunswick very, very well, and understand the capability of any company in Atlantic Provinces very, very well. I do have an example. We were down thinking about protecting commercial information, protecting government information from an IT perspective. And we've actually have a partnership with a company called Aura out of Halifax, who done some fantastic work. In fact, have technology, for example, they have face scanning ability and to measure your temperature during a pandemic, which is really important. So that company is working with us. We have a partnership struck up with them, a letter of agreement to discuss how they can integrate more into not only our company itself, but the technology itself. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's a process that we need to take time. We're being very methodical about it. As we're gathering this information, the 2020 to the 22 time frame is really around, I call it audits, but it's really, audits may be a big word, more an analyzing reviews what's out there today, because I don't know what I don't know today. So therefore, we're just trying to ensure that we're giving everybody the chance, the required chance to be able to participate. Next slide. So what we'll be looking at really is abilities, capabilities and abilities. Ability to provide technical, adequate economic products or services, to meet milestones and dates. That'll be incredibly important for our customers. Good quality management programs. History and oversight of the supply chain. Whatever parts you're using to build something, we'll want to know what's happening on that end. And really, non-conformances and corrective actions are really important. And in the nuclear industry, it's ensuring the company has what I call a safety culture and social responsibilities. I come from a company that I retired from, Bruce Power, who had that same focus on local first, that's going to be important to our company. That's what we're driving towards, and we want to make sure that the companies are we're all working together to help the province itself to get out of some of its issues that it has. Next slide. So what we're trying to do here, so I'll start from the left. You see skills and abilities. But I just want to point out a sentence at the bottom here. In these troubling times, the gathering of key data will pose an increased level of difficulty for the analysis. I can't run around the province, nor can my staff, to find out what everybody's doing. So it's going to be key that we need help for this study that we postulate to have done by the mid to late 2022s. We're really going to need help from everyone. I think it was interesting when Minister Holland talked about help on other things. Well, we really need help here. So there's really that capability and assessments that's going to occur. And it's really the options that we have is grandfathering. We know some companies will be grandfathered in because they've already worked in the nuclear business. They already have their codes and standards in place, and we'll be looking for things like the CSA standards and the ISO standards. And some companies might not have that, but it doesn't mean there won't be. They'll just be an undetermined group. We'll bin them over there to understand, and then we'll go back and see if there's not some more work we could do with companies. But then the binding exercise will really go into 3 buckets. The first bucket on the left is really directly from ARC Canada, which is a lot of engineering and type services. The middle bucket will be the first of a kind. And somebody coined this, and I really like the co-op approach, which really is, you can't, when you think about it, when we build the first one, the supply chain will not be up and fully operational. I do not believe we'll have the big manufacturing facility ready. So we'll have to find a way to do that more of a, it's going to be a little bit harder to do it that way, but we'll have to find a way to build it more as a group. We're on the third bucket on the right will be when the manufacturing facility is up and running, which is called the Notes. That's the plants we're going to sell elsewhere over time. So the bidding exercise will put the companies in all those three, and hopefully in all three for most of them. So we'll just provide that analysis to see where everything fits for different things we need done. Next slide. So again, reactivating the underutilized New Brunswick supply chain. Next slide, please. So it's interesting. I was reading Stats Can last week, and this is what our statistics are showing in New Brunswick. So we grew by 1.2% in 2019. We have the slowest growth in any province east of Manitoba. 10th year in a row, the economy has expanded at a rate below the national average. In those 10 years, Canada has grown by 24.5, and we've grown by 6.8. So we're the only province that's really not reaching double digit. So I think it's time for something to happen to assist us here. Assist all of us, for example. I'm a New Brunswicker, and I believe New Brunswick can do a lot better, and that's why I call it underutilized. We've really got to, get our companies growing faster. Next slide, please. So what we've done here is really to try to show the effort is required. So I'll start with the construction. You'll see the construction half moons across the top. You start with an average effort, and then they'll peak at one point. So you'll see a lot of work during construction, and you've seen that with when we built in the refurb of Point Lepreau. And then you see the operation is the blue lines called OM&A. That's how many staff that would be operating at the plant. And those are all good jobs and a lot of work there. But the yellow line is the supply chain line. It's the one that other provinces that benefit in the nuclear industry, and New Brunswick hasn't as much. And the slope of that curve will be dependent on the level of sales. More sales, it'll stand up a little quicker and we'll get to top. Those are all the jobs and all the work we're talking about. So it's really in three pieces. Running the plant, 40, 50 people. Construction, average maybe 750, peaking somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800. And then there's the supply chain, which are consistent jobs, which are thousands. And that's when as we continue to refer, and that's where all the work is going to be. Next slide, please. And in closing, I just want to show you again the numbers that Brett was talking about earlier, what this could mean to the province in person years of work, the GDP, and government revenue. Now, these are for both technologies, Moltex and us. Our numbers are in there somewhere, and it always depends how you look at these things, is how much conservatives you put in your numbers. But we're just about ready to do another review on ours, but it is significant, and there is a market out there. If anybody believes it, there is a market. There really, truly is. So I would just like to close by saying this. We're really looking forward to hearing from you, and so you'll see at the bottom there's a email address. Please take a picture of it or copy it or write it down somewhere. It is really critical. As I mentioned, we're in troubled times. We want to keep moving forward, and we need your help. And we really need you to send your information in. Skills, ability profiles, whatever it may be, whatever you think we need to know will be really critical for us to move forward here. And with that, I believe we have a little video that we're going to show of the little reactor being put together. But again, as I mentioned, please write down, take a picture, whatever, of that last slide. Okay, the video, I believe, Fawn. So basically here we're going to build. There's no music with this, so I'll talk my way through it. So you start with a hole. And as you can see, you lay some cement and some rebar. And then you start building the silo and the buildings around it. So a lot of these walls we're thinking could be called seawalls, they're called. And they're really built with steel, and you drop them in as you need them. But you can see the cylinder that went in, and the building again, and some interact in the cable trays and things like that. Some duct work. And you can see the crane on the right, obviously lowering all this stuff in here. And as soon as these ducts go in, then the main pieces go in. So we have a ring guider and a guard vessel goes in first, another ring, and here's the vessel going in now. You put the top plate on and a number of pieces. People ask me why it takes so long to build these things, but really when you look at it, it's quite simple. So these are all the parts and pieces we need. Here's a crane, for example. So the building is not that big, somewhere around 60 to 7% of a football field, roughly. That's the size of the facility, much smaller than what we're used to. Good. Well, thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you, Norm. That is extremely interesting. Again, you have touched on so much data here. We'll certainly, over time, unpack it. We do have a number of questions, but before we get to our questions, a couple of real key takeaways. I mean, if you're looking at 20% of the SMR market worth $160 billion, I mean, you really put it in context. I mean, a number like that really has to settle in with some of us, to be fair. It's just so massive. The other massive number that really stuck out with me was 51% of the components can be built in New Brunswick if everything goes according to plan. Now, obviously, that is per your studies and whatnot. It could be a little bigger, it could be a little smaller, but the point is it's roughly half, which is also an extremely good thing to hear as a New Brunswicker. The video, by the way, you should really literally put some of us non-visual people, allows us to put this in context. So thank you very much for that. As I say, we have a lot of questions, and I know we are a little tight for time, in all fairness. I'm just checking the clock. We have about 12 minutes for questions or so. The first one I'd like to bring up is actually to Minister Collins. I know, Minister Collins, you are fighting a bit of the clock here yourself, but I understand you're still on the line. May we ask you one specific question about funding that came up in the most recent provincial election? And we do know, obviously, the government in New Brunswick has funded to the tune of $10 million to date. A lot of people ask us at CME, and I know Norm is getting a lot of questions about funding. Are you able to talk about that? I know the last time we spoke, it was around federal funding. Minister Collins, I don't see, I'm afraid, I think he's dropped. Okay, so Norm, actually, while you're visible there, I know we talk about this. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, my perception is as much as anybody else's. As if everybody's from New Brunswick, you recognize that during the election, SMRs was discussed heavily. In fact, I believe it was in both the Liberal and Conservative party platforms. And both made a commitment to working with the federal government. And in fact, the Premier at one point commented that those negotiations are ongoing and almost done. We're just kind of working, and I know some due diligence happening in the background a little bit. It's my perception is there's faint signals that it's coming. Not exactly sure when, though. It's one of those things. Sometimes political decisions take time. But I always say, on the other hand, we all have to understand politicians in this country are extremely busy trying to take care of us, and I think you got to give them a little bit of slack on that piece. So, but who knows? We're still hoping before the end of the year to hear something to get us going again. We are ready to go. All our plans are in place. ARC is ready to embark in phase 2. We have been for some time now, but you know, we haven't sat around. We've done some work, and we've in particular we've done some design work, but we've also done a lot of planning work to make sure that we know exactly what needs to be done and by who.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that, Norm. Nothing like a loaded question to start. These are in no particular order, and again, only in the efforts of time. So thank you for bearing with me. So we have a question about headcount, and I know you touched on it. Could you just repeat your thought? The question is really around about headcount once the SMR is built, around daily operations and maintenance in particular on site. What would the headcount be roughly if you have a range?
So this is one of the major differences with the stations that are in play right now. Right now, what we're looking at is having, as I mentioned, a fleet services. So you can imagine, like, if you had 100 engineers at a plant right now, you would have 100 engineers at the head office, and they would cover off 10, 20, 30 plants. So so there's where you get your economics. You get the same amount of jobs, but you just they're in a different place. What we see right now is somewhere between 40 and 60. The numbers, you know, we've gone 40, 60, 50, 70. They've been in there as we continue to march forward. The safety case, the case or the case that we're proposing to the regulator will decide that as we move forward, how many people will be required. But when you say something is inherently safe, that means there's less people required. You'll still need maintenance people. So for example, we have a 20-year fuel cycle, but it doesn't mean the plant will run 20 years. It just means you don't have to fuel it for 20 years. So it can do like today with fuel, you know, 4 or 5 times a week. We'll fuel once in 20 years. However, you're still going to have outages and maintenance because you still have turbines and things like that, or secondary side. We foresee that around the 5 to 7 year mark when that's going to occur. So there'll be a couple of stoppages in the 20 years. So all that to say, it's a lot less people at site. There's more people at the fleet services, and there's more people in the supply chain.
Right. Understood. So Norm, you mentioned the manufacturing facility. You specifically said a port, and obviously in New Brunswick, we're blessed with 3 ports that are obviously very much usable at present. So I guess the question is around the decision to construct a short-term versus a longer-term manufacturing facility. Can you just explain that? Because it seems to one viewer, we're talking Point Lepreau as in essence the first one, but not necessarily the longer-term facility. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, so you have to understand. So we'll build the first one. And the first one, for us to meet some of the timelines, you can understand that the construction could well start 2025, 2026. I mean, we're not that far away. People talk about it's not that far away. So, well, that means if you're going to start something in let's say 25, that means you're really thinking about doing something in 2022 from a manufacturing and a supply chain perspective. So that's where I say the co-op approach will probably be the one we put in place there. So we'll have that first one. We're marching to the first one. And it's just like anything else. Once you build the first one, they will come. But I believe they'll come before then. So while you're getting that first unit built, you're thinking about the consistent manufacturing chain, which where the permanent facility would show up. So as I mentioned, that's why I call it basically a co-op versus the actual the physical first one, because you know we're not that far away from getting ready to build that first unit, and it just happens. You know, as I mentioned, when you have a prototype that's already ran, you have all that experience, you have all that operating experience in the background that Brett was talking about. It just gets us closer there. So a lot of the data that other people have to go find, we already have it type thing for the regulator. So.
Right, understood. So can you, knowing obviously we have a number of manufacturers listening today and they're extremely interested in this, they are varied size and shape, as you're very aware in the province of New Brunswick. Could you expand on the possible next steps for ARC in regards to the supply chain so that it's crystal clear to our viewers currently?
Yeah, so I can't stress this enough. And again, I hope everybody took that email down as Fawn Zeissner at arcnuclear.com .com. It's really important for us to gather that information. That's what we're doing because of where we are. I mean, I will not let my staff go to, not because it's unsafe, but it's just in the world we're in, we can't do what we usually do. So I really want to start gathering now, preparing ourselves for the next step. Our research will, as we continue to work on the design, we'll understand clearly what we need. So we made some assumption in phase one, as I mentioned.
Yes.
I was a bit taken, after looking at it, it was a surprise, but I was a bit taken aback there was that much we could do in New Brunswick. We have a very flexible workforce. We got some great companies here that can do a lot of stuff. You know, I've compared my stuff a little bit to shipbuilding. If we can build a ship, we can build one of these things. So I just want to make sure that we get all that data in place so we can have our specialists analyze and start reaching out to companies, in 9 months to a year's time after we get all this in place. I think that's really the first step. So I really ask everybody, if you're really interested, don't wait, send us your information because, it's just like anything else. We'll continue to march, and because we're marching so fast towards 2025, I'm not going to have a lot of play of trying to go find various companies. People have said, Norm, it's easier to go into Ontario. And the answer is yes. But that's not my first choice. This new process is truly a pan-Canadian approach. We're not excluding any province. We just want to include New Brunswick.
Very good point, Norm. Very good point. And the fact that you have the New Brunswick galley on the flag on your embossed on your brochure, among other things, we obviously know that you do fly the flag with pride. Your point about shipbuilding is of course, very good. We're great at building things in this province. We have a pride, a sense of ownership. So this should certainly all come together. Another quick question, back to market analysis briefly, if we could. So on some of your numbers, and again, there were a lot of them, we had to unpack some of them, but a couple came up to me in particular, and others have echoed this in their questions. Is there really room in the marketplace, both in Canada and globally, for all of the players in the SMR market? Because as you know, and as you've informed us today, there obviously are others outside of New Brunswick. So maybe you could just give us a snapshot of that. Please.
Yeah, my perception there is, because I think the market of the big reactors has shrunk basically, and for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is, like, for example, to do something at Point Lepreau right now would probably be in the range of $8 to $10 billion. So for a small grid, that doesn't work as well anymore. So therefore, you're really looking for, and there's still going to be room for the big ones wherever they may be, but really the small ones become more advantageous in a way. From an economic perspective, you build them as you need them, right? Because with the first one takes some more time, but after that, you're 3-4 years, you're building these things. The market is well divided. I think you're quite right. Just the micros are going to be more of a niche market. I think they're smaller. There's a few places for them, but the reactors of our size, and there's very few. They work well in a small grid, or grids where in countries that really are not a strong grid. They're not well taken care of. They're only for so many electrical outlets, I guess. But also for a grid that don't want a lot of used waste in their jurisdiction. So therefore, we take care of that for them. So the market is there. I think there's going to be more than one. Like I said, China's building an SMR. It's not coming to Canada, and the Arc Canada is not going to China. So, they're going to be in both places. We in our market, we see it in New Brunswick. We see it for New Brunswick in a couple of cases, for our own, to help Nova Scotia with their coal, and to help sell power to the U.S. Ontario will need some as they continue to close the old big ones. Saskatchewan, we heard, are trying to get off gas. And coal in particular, and also is Alberta. Alberta needs help. So Canadian market seems to be fairly strong for a number of type of reactors, because it depends what size you want. And then if you look around the world, that's really the interesting piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Norm, we do run a tight ship, so to speak. As you've mentioned, we're going to bring that up as a theme throughout. I can guarantee you that. But it is 2:30 Atlantic. We have gotten to our time limit today, I'm afraid. I certainly do want to thank you, Norm, and your team. It's been a pleasure dealing with you and the ARC folk in St. John. I'd like to thank all the viewers. We have a lot more questions, to be very fair. We are going to get back to you. We just because of the efforts of time, we couldn't deal with all the questions today. But this is very good. There are a bunch of very, very good questions. Some are technical, some are not so much. Others are market related. So that's a very good thing. Again, I appreciate this. We're always interested to hear your thoughts, whether you go out directly to ARC or to me at CME-MEC.ca. We welcome your comments and about this webinar or quite frankly anything else. I know we live in quite a different time. COVID has certainly turned us all upside down, but we do think optimistically, obviously, in New Brunswick on a wide variety of fronts. This transformational industry certainly is one of them. So thank you so very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.